He asked the same question over and over, until Karoline had enough. What happened next stunned the entire nation. The White House briefing room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, their lenses locked onto the podium where Karoline Leavitt stood, composed, unwavering. She adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started." Hands shot up instantly. Journalists hungry for a headline. Karoline pointed to a familiar face, someone from a major network. A question about the economy. She answered smoothly, delivering the kind of sharp, no-nonsense response that came with the job. Then another, this time on national security. Again, she handled it with the precision of a seasoned press secretary. But then it happened. A voice cut through the room, sharper than the rest. "Ms. Leavitt, let's talk about the real issue here." It was him, Daniel Reed, a known provocateur from a liberal news network. He sat near the front, leaned forward, eyes locked on her with the kind of smug confidence that came with knowing his network would run whatever happened next on a 24-hour loop. Karoline didn't flinch. "Go ahead." He wasted no time. "Would you say this administration's policies are designed to systematically oppress marginalized communities?" The words landed like a grenade. The room went still. Some reporters exchanged glances. Others lowered their pens, sensing what was about to unfold. Karoline exhaled. "I've answered that before. This administration is focused on policies that benefit all Americans. If you'd like to discuss today's topic, I'd be happy to continue." A murmur rippled through the room, but Daniel wasn't done. He leaned in further, eyes narrowing. "You didn't actually answer the question," he pushed. "Can you directly address—" "I did answer," Karoline interrupted, her tone calm but firm. She glanced around the room, signaling she was ready to move on, but Daniel wasn't ready to let go. He had what he wanted, a confrontation. "I just don't see why you're avoiding it," he pressed. "It's a simple yes or no." The temperature in the room shifted. Reporters tensed. Some looked intrigued, others uncomfortable. No one liked a press conference turning into a spectacle. Karoline's grip on the podium tightened just slightly. She had played this game before. She knew the difference between seeking accountability and creating a viral moment. "I'm not avoiding anything," she said, controlled. "I'm staying on topic. If you have a relevant question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll be moving on." But Daniel smirked. He wasn't backing down. "So, that's a no comment?" The air in the room tightened. Cameras panned between them. It was no longer a briefing. This was a showdown. A hush fell over the room, waiting, watching. Karoline adjusted her stance. "I've answered your question. I'm moving on now." She pointed to another journalist in the back, but before they could even open their mouth. "Why is it so hard for you to give a straight answer?" Daniel cut in again, his voice sharper now, louder, demanding. A flicker of irritation crossed Karoline's face. Not much, just enough for those paying close attention to catch it. The cameras caught everything. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. This wasn't about journalism. This was about creating a narrative. Daniel shifted in his seat, sensing he had the room's attention. He pressed forward, his tone edged with a challenge. "Do you deny that minority communities have been disproportionately affected by recent policies?" Karoline's jaw tightened, but her expression remained neutral. "This administration is committed to policies that uplift all Americans, regardless of background. I have stated that clearly. Now, if you'd like to discuss," Daniel cut in again. "So you're refusing to acknowledge the facts." A low murmur swept through the room. Some journalists looked down at their notes. Others, their gazes flickering between Karoline and Daniel, were waiting. Karoline took a steady breath. "I am not refusing anything. I am addressing your question with the facts at hand. If you are here to have a conversation, we can continue. If you are here to create a spectacle, I will move on." Daniel smirked. "So it's a yes or a no. Do you support policies that disproportionately affect marginalized communities?" Silence, the kind that weighed down the room. Karoline's eyes flickered across the press pool. She knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want an answer. He wanted a headline. She gripped the podium, her fingers pressing against the cool surface. Then slowly, she spoke. "This administration supports policies that strengthen our economy, create jobs, and ensure prosperity for all citizens. The data speaks for itself." Daniel leaned back, arms crossed. "That's not a yes or a no." Karoline exhaled through her nose. "I've answered your question. Moving on." Daniel wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice rising just slightly. "So you're dodging the question. Why are you afraid to answer?" The tension in the room crackled. The other journalists shifted uncomfortably. Some stole glances at each other, unsure whether to step in or let the battle play out. Karoline locked eyes with Daniel, unwavering, unshaken. "I am not afraid," she said, voice steady. "What I won't do is engage in bad faith arguments designed for sound bites." A flicker of frustration passed over Daniel's face. For a moment he faltered, but he recovered quickly, shaking his head. "The American people deserve transparency." Karoline's smile was almost imperceptible. "And that's exactly what they're getting." Silence settled over the room again. Charged, unresolved. Then another journalist cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Ms. Leavitt, moving on." But Daniel wasn't done. He pressed forward one last time. "So just to be clear, you refuse to directly answer my question?" Karoline let the words hang in the air. Then, finally, she tilted her head slightly. "I refuse to play your game." A slow murmur rippled through the press pool. Some nodded, others scribbled furiously. Daniel opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Karoline turned her attention elsewhere. "Next question." A few quiet gasps rippled through the room. Some reporters scribbled furiously, sensing that the moment was spiraling into something much bigger than a press briefing. Karoline gave a measured blink, the only sign that the remark had landed. She let go of the podium, exhaling just slightly. Then she smiled, but not the warm, diplomatic kind. This was different. A smile that said, "I see exactly what you're trying to do." "Transparency," she said slowly. "That's exactly what this administration stands for. But what you are doing isn't about transparency. It's about theatrics." The words hung in the air. Daniel's smirk faltered. Just slightly, but enough. From the back of the room, a veteran journalist, someone who had covered politics for decades, leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "This isn't journalism," he muttered to a colleague. "This is performance art." But Daniel didn't care. He knew what he was doing. The longer he kept this going, the more likely it was to go viral. Karoline saw it too. She had a choice: engage and give the moment more fuel, or shut it down entirely. She sighed and looked toward security at the edge of the room. She didn't have to say a word. The shift in her gaze was enough. The room tensed. Everyone knew what that meant. Daniel saw it too. His smirk disappeared. "You're seriously doing this?" he asked, voice lower now, but sharp, cutting. Karoline remained still. A uniformed officer took a slow step forward. He didn't need to speak. The meaning was clear. Daniel hesitated. He had two choices: stand his ground and force them to remove him, turning it into a national spectacle, or walk out on his own terms. He exhaled, stood, grabbed his notepad. "This is a disgrace," he muttered, just loud enough to be picked up by the mics. Then as he turned to the exit, his final jab. "You can kick me out, but you can't silence the truth." Karoline didn't respond. The door closed behind him. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, it should have been. By the time Karoline stepped off the podium, her phone was already buzzing. An aide hurried to her side. "It's already trending," she said breathlessly. #silencing. The press is picking up steam." Karoline exhaled through her nose. "Of course it was." The aide hesitated. "Major outlets are running with it. Some are fair, just reporting what happened. But others," she scrolled through her phone. "Leavitt shuts down press freedom. Reporter ejected for asking tough questions." Karoline smirked. "Tough questions?" she repeated, half a scoff, half a laugh. "That wasn't a question. That was a setup." She knew what was coming next. The headlines, the outrage, the battle for truth had just begun. Outside the White House, reporters had already gathered, their cameras trained on the entrance. They were waiting for her to step out, waiting for a statement. Her comms director approached. "We need to get ahead of this." Karoline nodded. "Release the full footage. No edits, no commentary, just the raw exchange." Her aide hesitated. "Are you sure? It might escalate things." Karoline didn't blink. "The people deserve to see the truth, unfiltered." Within minutes, the official White House account posted the entire unedited footage. The caption was simple: "Watch for yourself." It was a gamble, but Karoline knew it was the right move. Let the people see how Daniel Reed had pushed. Let them see how he had ignored protocol, hijacked the briefing, and refused to let it go. It didn't take long for reactions to flood in. Some doubled down. Unbelievable. She shut down a journalist for doing his job. But others, they saw it for what it was. He wasn't asking questions. He was grandstanding. She gave him multiple chances. He wanted the fight. This wasn't journalism. This was a stunt. By the evening, the narrative had split. On one side, major liberal networks, painting her as an authoritarian figure, silencing the press. On the other, conservative commentators praising her for standing her ground. Cable news panels dissected the footage. Pundits debated the ethics of press briefings. Social media boiled over with arguments, memes, and outrage. And in the middle of it all, Karoline remained unshaken. She had played it smart. She hadn't overreacted. She hadn't fed the drama. She had simply let the truth speak for itself. But the battle wasn't over. The next morning, Daniel Reed was booked on every major liberal network. Sitting under studio lights, he played the part perfectly. The victim, the silenced journalist, the martyr for free speech. "I was just asking a question," he said, shaking his head. "And instead of answering, they had me removed. If that doesn't concern you, it should." The host nodded solemnly. "Do you feel this administration is actively working to suppress journalism?" Daniel sighed dramatically. "I don't want to say that outright, but the actions speak for themselves." The headlines that followed, predictable. Whistleblower journalist speaks out. Dark day for free press in America. Karoline watched the coverage from her office. She wasn't surprised. Her aide walked in. "We can respond, if you want. Get you on air." Karoline shook her head. "No." Her aide frowned. "You don't want to fight back?" Karoline's lips curled into a slight smile. "I already did." She gestured toward her laptop screen, where the unedited video had already surpassed 10 million views. The comments spoke for themselves. "We saw what really happened. We're not buying the fake outrage." She handled it perfectly. He wanted a moment, and she didn't give it to him. "Watch the full video and you'll see the truth. And then, the best one. The facts don't lie. The game is over." Karoline leaned back in her chair. She had won, and this time, the truth had won with her.